Okay, this is going to be lesson 9-6 notes, and we're going to be working on what's called the quadratic formula. Okay, now the quadratic formula looks really big and kind of scary here when I first teach it to you, but just take note that it's kind of the same thing every time. You get to utilize your calculators every time, all right? And I find that most students pick this up a lot quicker than factoring, okay? So like I said, it's going to be big and scary here at the beginning, but you can do it. Okay, so quadratic formula. First off, this is another way that we are going to solve something that has an exponent of 2, okay? So this is another way to solve a quadratic, right? Exponent of 2 means quadratic, okay? So we have factoring. Now, one of the things that we skimmed over briefly when we were factoring is that not everything's factorable. Sometimes we get an answer of prime because we can't find any factors that work out, okay? So that is why do we use this? Well, that's why, is because while this guy might be factorable, a bunch of them are not going to be factorable. And how do we solve the things that aren't factorable? Because they still have answers. We just have to come up with a different way to do it. All right, so the quadratic formula here, okay? The actual formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a, okay? All right, so again, why would we do something crazy like this? It's because not everything's going to be factorable. So what I'm going to show you here on this first example is I'm going to show you how do we take this guy here, and then let's review how do we solve by factoring, okay? And then I'm going to show you how we solve it with quadratic formula just to show you, look, you're going to get the same answer either way. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start solving this guy by factoring, okay? And this should be review. We're looking for factors of negative 24 that are going to get us negative 2, all right? And 4 and 6 kind of pop into my head there, and then to get a negative 2, I'm going to put a negative on that 6. So my factors are going to be x plus 4 and x minus 6. Okay, now, again, as a review, you're going to set each factor equals 0 and solve. So we have x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 6 equals 0. So x equals negative 4 and x equals positive 6. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use the exact same thing, but we're going to use it down here on the quadratic. Okay, and so one of the things we have to understand first off here is what are A, B, and C. Where did those come from? What are those? Okay, so when I'm looking at an equation here, A is simply the number in front of that x squared. B is the number in front of the x, and then C is just this guy right here. So really, if you're thinking about standard form, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so that's where that's coming from. Okay, so down here, I'm going to go ahead and transfer these numbers down here. So I know I've got A is equal to 1, B is equal to negative 2, and C is equal to negative 24. Okay, now I'm going to use the quadratic formula, so that big long thing here, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now the nice thing about this is you don't have to have this memorized, you just have to know how to use it. Okay, all right, so now you're just going to be plugging in. This is just substitution, plug it in. Now, on this one here, so when it says negative b, you'll also hear people just say opposite of b. So in other words, just change your sign here. What's the opposite of negative 2? Well, the opposite of negative 2 is 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus, all right, now b squared, your b value is negative 2. Now notice I'm putting that in parentheses, right? When we have a negative number with an exponent, we have to put it in parentheses when we write that negative 2 in there. Minus 4, my a value is 1, and my c value is negative 24. All over 2 times 1. Okay, now get your calculators out. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are just going to type exactly what we have here into our calculators. Okay, so you're going to take negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. Type that in your calculator. And so when I did that, I got, oh, wrong guy there. I got x equals, I'm going to go ahead and keep the 2 out front, plus or minus. Now on the inside there, on that yellow part, when I typed that in my calculator, I got 100 divided by 2. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of 100 and get 10. So I have 2 plus or minus 10 divided by 2. Okay, so now at this point right here, this plus or minus is telling you that there are two answers. Remember, on a quadratic, we need two solutions, okay? So we're going to go ahead and break this up. And the first guy, I'm going to have 2 plus 10 divided by 2. And on the second guy, I'm going to do 2 minus 10 divided by 2. So basically, I'm just breaking up this positive and negative into two separate parts, okay? Now, order of operations, add the top there first, and you get 12 divided by 2, which is 6. On this guy, 2 minus 10 is negative 8, divided by 2 would be negative 4. And those are my two solutions. So now, when I zoom out here and kind of look at this, you're getting the same answer whether you factor or we use the quadratic formula, okay? Now, if factoring is easy and you're able to find the answer quickly, I highly recommend factoring. However, if you can't find the factors quickly, the quadratic is kind of the way to go. Yeah, it's more work, but you will be able to solve every single problem that has an exponent of 2 using this guy, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and move over here to 2A. And right here, guys, when it says leave your answers exact, I should have taken that off. Don't do that, okay? We're not going to be worrying about that. We're just coming up with answers, okay? All right. So now we're going to go ahead. The first things we got to talk about here is just like when we were solving with factoring, we have to set it equal to 0. So that first step is still going to be the same no matter what. We're going to bring that 4 over and get 15x squared minus 8x minus 4 equals 0. So again, I've got A, B is negative 8, and C is negative 4. Okay, make sure it's in standard form. All right, so now I'm going to start my quadratic. So x equals negative b, or the opposite of b. So the opposite of negative 8 would be 8 plus or minus b squared. So negative 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. All over 2 times a, or in this case, 2 times 15. All right, so now get those calculators out, and let's go ahead and type this guy in right away, and let's see if we can get to the right answer. So I've got negative 8 squared minus 4 times 15 times negative 4, and I end up with 304 there. So x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 304 divided by 30. Okay? All right, now I got to put the square root of 304 in my calculator. If your calculator is like the ones we have in the classroom, and when you just typed in the square root of 304, and if it gave you an answer that says 4 root 19, what I need you to do is I want you to find your enter button, okay? And right above the enter button, you will see a double like triangle looking thing, okay, white, okay? Push that double triangle button. Okay, and that should give you your decimal, okay? So when you hit that double arrow, for those of you who have the same type of calculator we have in the classroom, hit that double arrow, and you should be getting 17.4, rounded off one spot. Okay, so find the double arrow and put right above that enter sign, okay? For some of you guys, you have older calculators, you'll just put in 304. It'll automatically give you the 17.4, so you don't need to worry about hitting that double arrow right above the enter key, okay? All right, so coming back over here, I've got x equals 8 plus or minus 17.4 divided by 30. Okay, now break it up into your two different parts. You've got 8 plus 17.4 divided by 30, and you have got 8 minus 17.4 divided by 30. Okay, so 8 plus 17.4 is 25.4. And now I'm going to divide it by 30. And I'm getting 0.84. I think on this, we're just going to go one decimal place, so that won't round up. So I'm just going to put 0.8. All right, now on this guy, I'm going to go ahead and take 8 minus 17.4 and get negative 9.4. And I'm going to divide by 30 here. And I'm going to end up with x equals negative 0.3 when it's rounded 1 decimal place. Okay, all right, let's go over to B here. Okay, again, we need to go ahead and move this x over and make sure it's in standard form. So I've got x squared, not plus, how about minus 9x, right? Because we're subtracting it over into the middle here. So we got a minus 9x plus 21 equals 0. Again, keep in mind, it has to be equal to 0. Now we've got our a. So a is technically 1 here, b is negative 9, and c is 21. All right, so I've got x equals negative b, or the opposite of b, which is 9, plus or minus the square root of negative 9 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, or 2 times 1. Okay, now let's go ahead and type this into our calculator, please. So we're going to get negative 9 squared minus 4 times 1 times 21. Side note here, just make sure that if you're typing in your calculator and it's a negative, you have to put those parentheses in there. You're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, so you have to put the parentheses in your calculator to get the correct answer if you're typing it all in one line. All right, so I've got x equals 9 plus or minus. I got the square root of negative 3 divided by 2. Now, you cannot have the square root of a negative number. This is a big no-no. Type it in your calculator. It'll give you either an error message or domain error message. You're not going to get an answer, okay? Anytime you have a negative inside of a square root, you can't get an answer. It's going to be a no solution. All right, so let's go ahead and head down to C here. So this one's already set equal to 0. So I'm going to have A, B, and C. So x equals negative 24, right? The opposite of b, plus or minus 24 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. All right, so let's go ahead and type this into our calculator and see what we end up with here. So 24 squared minus 4 times 9 times 16, and I got a 0 on that one. So at this point right here, I've got x equals negative 24 plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 18. So now when I'm looking at this guy, 0 is just 0. It's not going to go anywhere. So really all this is just going to drop off. So I'm going to end up with x equals negative 24 divided by 18 only, because that 0 is kind of worthless. So now when I take the 24 and divide it by 18, you can either have it as negative like 1.3. It's technically repeating. If you choose to leave it as a fraction, just make sure that you reduce it to negative 4/3. Okay? And so it's that answer. So then this guy, we only ended up with 1 because we had a 0 inside that square root. You only got one solution. Okay? All right, on D here, so let's go ahead and again set it equal to 0. Let's add the 11 over to the other side. So I've got x squared plus 7x plus 11 equals 0. All right, so my A value is 1, B is 7, and C is 11. So I've got x equals negative 7, or the opposite of 7. So it would be negative 7 plus or minus 7 squared, B squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 11, all over 2 times 1. Okay, and let's go ahead now and type this into our calculator. So I get 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 11. All right, I ended up with a 5 there. So x, dang it, wrong one, x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 5 divided by 2. So now I'm going to type the square root of 5 into my calculator. Again, hit that double arrow above the enter if you need a decimal answer. I've got negative 7 plus or minus 2.2 divided by 2. Okay, so now I'm going to break it up. Negative 7 plus 2.2 divided by 2, and negative 7 minus 2.2 divided by 2. So again, remember, we're just breaking up that plus and minus into 2 separate parts, okay? All right, so now in your calculators, we go ahead and subtract and get negative Oops. -4. How about 4 instead? -4.8, and divide that by 2 and get -2.4. Okay, on this one, we're going to put that together and get -9.2. And then we're going to divide that by 2, and we end up with -4.6. And those are your two solutions. Okay. All right, last problem here. It wouldn't be a day if I didn't throw a word problem at you. Okay, now in this one, this says round to the nearest hundredth, so I'm going to go 2 decimal places on this. Okay, in the shot put, an athlete throws a heavy metal ball through the air. The arc of the ball is modeled by the equation, where x is the horizontal distance and y is the height. How far from the athlete will the ball land? Okay, so for those of you who are missing out on your track season right now, that's what this is. Okay, it goes up, you're just throwing a little ball, and it comes down. And our question we're trying to figure out is, how far out does it land? Okay, all right, now the nice part about this is they've already given us the equation up here, and if it's saying the ball is going to be landing, that means my y value will be 0. Okay, where's it landing? It's landing on the ground. The height of the ground is 0. So I'm just going to plug in 0 for y. So I have 0 equals -0.04 x squared plus 0.84 x plus 2. All right, so now start your A, B, and C. So x is the opposite of b, so -0.84 plus or minus 0.84 squared minus 4 times a times my c value, which is 2, all over 2 times a, which is -0.04. Okay, all right, again, we're going to utilize our calculators and type this puppy in right away. So I end up with 0.84 squared minus 4 times -0.04 times 2. All right, so when I did that, I've got x, I do that every time, don't I? I got x equals -0.84 plus or minus the square root, and I got 1.0256 when I type that into my calculator. And then on the bottom here, I have -0.008. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and square root the 1.0256. Okay, and when I did that, I have -0.84 plus or minus the square root. Oh, no, we just did the square root. Plus or minus 1.01. I'm going to go ahead and put out 2 decimal places since that's what the directions are kind of asking us to do here. And then on the bottom here, on the bottom, glad I caught that. There should only be 1 0 there, not 2. Sorry. Okay, so then on the, so now I've got -0.08, all right, and we're going to break it up into our 2 parts because of that positive and negative. So I've got -0.84 plus 1.01 divided by -0.08, okay, and I have got -0.84 minus 1.01 divided by 0.08 negative. Okay, so now working that first one there, -0.84 plus 1.01. All right, and I got 0.17 divided by -0.08, so 0.17 divided by 0.08. And I ended up with -2.25 when I did that. Okay, all right, on the next one here, I've got -0.084 minus 1.01. So on the top on this one, I've got -1.85, and now I'm going to divide it. And I ended up with 23.125, but since it's said to the nearest hundredth, that's going to be 23.13. Okay, so now we have two answers here, but only one of them will make sense. This guy right here is no good. Explain to me how you're throwing a shot put and you're going negative 2.25. That means you had to throw it backwards. That is not such a good throw, okay? So on the other guy here, this is saying it's going out 23.15, and are we talking meters or feet here? What are we talking? Meters, okay? So we're always going to label since it's real world, okay? So our final answer there would be 23.13 meters. And that concludes these notes.